You know that moment when your entire world shifts? When everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you suddenly becomes a lie? Well, that happened to me last Thanksgiving, and I'm about to tell you exactly how my sister's cruelty finally caught up with her in the most spectacular way possible. But first, let me paint you the picture of what led to this nuclear explosion at our family dinner table. Because this story, it's been 32 years in the making. Picture this: Thanksgiving dinner 2023. The whole family gathered around my mother's dining table, the same table where I'd sat through countless meals feeling invisible, overlooked, like I was just taking up space meant for someone more important. The conversation was flowing, wine glasses clinking, everyone laughing at my sister's stories about her perfect life with her perfect husband in their perfect house. And then it happened. My sister, Sarah, golden child extraordinaire, leaned back in her chair with that smug smile I've known since childhood, the one that always preceded some devastating comment designed to put me in my place. She raised her voice just enough to make sure everyone could hear, because God forbid she miss an opportunity to humiliate me publicly. You know, she said, swirling her wine glass like she was delivering some profound wisdom. Some women mature late in life. They figure things out eventually. She paused, letting that sink in, savoring the moment. But then, some never do. I mean, 32 and still unmarried? At what point do you just accept that maybe it's not meant to be? The table went silent, except for a few uncomfortable chuckles from my uncle and cousin. My parents just sat there, not defending me, not shutting her down, just letting it happen like they always did, like they always had. But here's the thing about being pushed to your breaking point. Sometimes you discover you're stronger than you ever imagined. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't storm off like I had so many times before. Instead, I set down my fork very carefully, looked my sister dead in the eye, and smiled. Really smiled. For the first time in months, maybe years. Married, actually, I said, my voice steady and clear. You just weren't invited. The silence that followed was deafening. Silverware stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-sentence. I watched the color drain from Sarah's face as the weight of my words hit her. Because she knew. Oh, she knew exactly what I meant. And that, my friends, was the moment 32 years of family dysfunction finally exploded into the open. To understand how we got to that moment, you need to understand the family I grew up in. You need to understand what it's like to be the second child, the afterthought, the one who never quite measured up to the shining star that was my older sister. Sarah wasn't just the favorite, she was the family crown jewel, the one everything revolved around. From the moment I could form memories, it was clear that she was special, and I was not. She was 3 years older, which in family dynamics might as well have been 3 decades. She got there first. First words, first steps, first everything. And she made damn sure I knew that whatever I accomplished, she had already done it better. When Sarah learned to read, my parents acted like she'd discovered fire. They bought her books by the dozen, set up a special reading corner in the living room, and invited neighbors over to watch their little genius perform. When I learned to read 2 years later, earlier than most kids actually, my mother just nodded and said, "That's nice, honey. Sarah was reading chapter books by your age." Every birthday party was Sarah's showcase, even when it wasn't her birthday. She'd somehow managed to make herself the center of attention, whether it was by performing some talent, announcing some achievement, or just by being so charming that adults couldn't help but fawn over her. I'd sit there in my party dress, watching my own guests gravitate toward my sister, listening to them tell my parents how lucky they were to have such a wonderful daughter. Singular daughter, as if I wasn't even there. Christmas mornings were the worst. Sarah would wake up early and organize all her presents by size, making sure her pile looked bigger than mine. She'd open each gift slowly, dramatically, making sure everyone was watching her reactions. When I'd get excited about something, she'd find a way to diminish it. Oh, I had one of those when I was younger. Or, the newer version is so much better. Or, my personal favorite, I guess that's perfect for someone your age. School achievements? Forget about it. When Sarah made honor roll, my parents took her out for a celebration dinner at her favorite restaurant. They framed her report card. They called the grandparents. When I made honor roll the next year, my dad said, "Good job," without looking up from his newspaper. When Sarah got into college, a decent state school, nothing Ivy League, you'd have thought she'd been accepted to Harvard, Yale, and Princeton simultaneously. My parents threw her a graduation party, invited everyone they knew, and spent weeks bragging about their brilliant daughter who was going places in life. When I got a full scholarship to a better school 3 years later, my mom said, "Well, that's one less thing we have to pay for." The favoritism was so blatant, so consistent, so utterly devastating that I spent most of my childhood wondering what was wrong with me. Was I not smart enough, not charming enough, not worthy of the same love and attention? I tried everything, excelling in school, learning instruments, playing sports, volunteering, anything to earn even a fraction of the praise that Sarah received just for existing. Nothing worked. The hierarchy was established, and I was permanently relegated to supporting character status in the story of Sarah's amazing life. You want to know what real cruelty looks like? It's not the dramatic moments you see in movies. It's not the screaming fights or obvious abuse. It's the slow, steady erosion of your self-worth through countless small moments that, individually, seem almost insignificant. It's having your birthday forgotten 3 years in a row while your sister's birthday is planned like a royal wedding. It's watching your parents text constantly in the family group chat about Sarah's new couch, her work promotion, her vacation photos, while your messages get one-word responses or just likes. When I graduated from college summa cum laude, my parents came to the ceremony but left early because they had dinner reservations. When Sarah graduated with a 3.2 GPA, they threw her a party and invited 50 people. When I got my first real job at a prestigious company, my dad asked if it came with good health insurance. When Sarah got hired as a receptionist at a dental office, they acted like she'd been named CEO of a Fortune 500 company. When I bought my first house at 28, a beautiful little place that I saved for years to afford, my mother's response was, "Make sure you get a good security system. Single women living alone, you never know." When Sarah moved in with her boyfriend to a rental apartment, my parents helped them move and brought housewarming gifts. The pattern was so consistent, so predictable, that I started to internalize it. Maybe I really was the family disappointment. Maybe there really was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me less worthy of love and attention. But the wedding situation, that broke something in me that I didn't know could break. 2 years ago, I met David. Not at a bar, not on a dating app, but at a volunteer event for literacy programs. He was there with his daughter from his first marriage, helping kids with reading difficulties. I was there because I'd been volunteering for years, finding purpose in helping others the way I wished someone had helped me feel valued growing up. We started talking during the break, just casual conversation about the kids, the program, how rewarding it was to see children's confidence grow when they master a new skill. He was kind, genuine, and most importantly, he listened to me. Actually listened, not just waited for his turn to talk. David didn't know about my family dynamics. He didn't know about the golden child situation or the years of feeling invisible. To him, I was just Emma, funny, intelligent, passionate about my work and my causes. For the first time in my adult life, someone saw me for who I really was, not as Sarah's little sister or the family disappointment. Our relationship developed slowly, naturally. We'd volunteer together on weekends, grab coffee afterward, talk for hours about books and travel and dreams. He told me about his divorce, how he'd married young and grown apart from his ex-wife, how he was determined to be the best father possible to his 8-year-old daughter, Lucy. I told him about my work, my hobbies, my hopes for the future. I didn't mention the family stuff at first. It felt too pathetic, too much like baggage I didn't want to burden him with. But eventually, as we grew closer, it came out. The favoritism, the constant comparisons, the way I'd never felt quite good enough for my own family. David was horrified, not in a dramatic way, but in that quiet, furious way that comes when someone you care about has been mistreated. He couldn't understand how parents could be so blind to their own child's worth, how siblings could be so cruel to each other. "You know you're incredible, right?" he said one evening as we walked through the park near my house. "You're brilliant and funny and kind. And anyone who can't see that is missing out on knowing an amazing person." I cried. Right there on the walking path, I just broke down and cried because I'd waited 30 years to hear someone say those words about me. 6 months later, David proposed. Not with some elaborate public display, but privately in my living room, after we'd spent the evening cooking dinner together and watching old movies. He told me he loved me, that he wanted to build a life with me, that he couldn't imagine his future without me in it. I said yes, obviously. How could I not? This man saw me, valued me, chose me, not as a consolation prize or a backup plan, but as his first choice, his partner, his equal. We decided on a small wedding. David had been through the big wedding production with his first wife and wanted something more intimate this time. I'd never dreamed of a massive ceremony anyway. I wanted something meaningful, with people who actually cared about us there to celebrate our love. The guest list was simple: close friends, David's family who had welcomed me with open arms, a few colleagues we were particularly close to, and of course, my family. Planning our wedding was the happiest I'd ever been. We chose a beautiful garden venue about an hour outside the city, small enough to feel intimate, but with gorgeous natural beauty that would make every photo special. The ceremony would be in late spring when everything was blooming, followed by dinner and dancing under string lights. I found the perfect dress. Not a huge ball gown, but an elegant, simple design that made me feel beautiful and confident. David looked incredible in his navy suit. Lucy was going to be our flower girl, and she was so excited about her special dress and her basket of petals that she practiced walking down the aisle in their living room every day for weeks. I spent weeks addressing invitations by hand, choosing beautiful stationery that reflected our personalities and the tone we wanted for the day. Each envelope was carefully addressed, each invitation personally written with a note about how much it would mean to us to have that person there. For my family, I went even further. I knew this was a big moment, and despite everything, I wanted them there. I wanted my parents to walk me down the aisle. I wanted to dance with my father at my reception. I even wanted Sarah there because she was my sister, and somewhere deep down, despite everything, I still hoped that my happiness might be enough to bridge the gap between us. I hand-delivered their invitations when I went to visit 2 months before the wedding. I sat in my childhood living room, told them about David and how wonderful he was. showed them pictures of the venue, talked about how excited I was to start this new chapter of my life. My parents seemed pleased, if a little subdued. They asked about the details: time, location, whether they needed to book hotel rooms. My father even offered to help pay for some of the costs, which was more support than I'd expected. Sarah was quieter than usual, but she looked at the invitation, asked about the dress code, and said she'd check her calendar. Not exactly enthusiasm, but I told myself it was just Sarah being Sarah. "It means so much to me that you'll all be there," I told them as I was leaving. "This is the most important day of my life, and I want to share it with the people I love." My mother hugged me and said they wouldn't miss it for the world. 2 months later, none of them showed up. May 15th, 2023, the most beautiful day of my life that became the most heartbreaking. Everything was perfect. The weather was gorgeous, sunny and warm with a light breeze that made the garden smell like heaven. The flowers were in full bloom. The vendors all arrived on time, and Lucy looked like a little princess in her flower girl dress. David's family had arrived the night before and taken me out for a lovely dinner, telling embarrassing stories about him as a child and officially welcoming me to the family. His parents, Tom and Marie, were the kind of people I'd always imagined having as in-laws: warm, funny, genuinely interested in my life and dreams. The morning of the wedding, I got ready with my maid of honor, Jessica, who had been my best friend since college. She was the sister I should have had: supportive, loyal, genuinely happy for my happiness. As she helped me into my dress and did my hair, she kept talking about how radiant I looked, how perfect David and I were together, how this was going to be the most beautiful ceremony she'd ever attended. But as we got closer to the ceremony time, I kept checking my phone, waiting for updates from my family. They were supposed to arrive 2 hours early for photos, but 2 o'clock came and went with no word. I texted my mother asking if they were running late. No response. By 3:30, half an hour before the ceremony, I was starting to panic. Jessica called my parents' house. No answer. She tried Sarah's cell phone. Straight to voicemail. "Maybe they got lost," David suggested gently when I told him they weren't there yet. "Your dad probably took a wrong turn, and you know how he is about stopping to ask for directions." But I knew. Deep in my gut, I knew they weren't coming. There's a difference between running late and completely vanishing, and my family had crossed that line. We delayed the ceremony by 30 minutes, then 45. Our guests were starting to look concerned, whispering among themselves. The photographer kept asking if we were ready to start. The officiant was checking his watch. Finally, David took my hands and looked into my eyes. "Emma, I love you. I want to marry you today, right now, with or without them. This is about us, about our love, about our commitment to each other. Don't let their absence take away from that." He was right, of course. We got married in that beautiful garden, surrounded by people who truly loved and supported us. Lucy walked down the aisle like the perfect little flower girl she was. David's vows made me cry happy tears. When we kissed as husband and wife, everyone cheered. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was everything I dreamed of, except for the gaping hole where my family should have been. During the reception, I called my mother from the bathroom. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding distracted. "Oh, Emma, honey, how's the wedding going?" How's the wedding going? Like she'd forgotten, like she hadn't just completely abandoned me on the most important day of my life. "It's over, Mom. The ceremony finished 2 hours ago. Where were you?" Silence. Then, "Oh my God, Emma, I'm so sorry. We got the dates mixed up. Sarah had it on her calendar for next weekend, and I'm so sorry, sweetheart." We're all here at Sarah's house for her engagement party, and her engagement party. Sarah, who had been dating her boyfriend for 8 months, had gotten engaged and thrown a party on the same day as my wedding, and my parents had chosen to be there instead of at my ceremony. Mom, I said, my voice breaking, I hand-delivered those invitations. You confirmed. You said you wouldn't miss it for the world. I know, honey. We just got confused. Sarah's engagement was so sudden, and she needed help setting up. And we thought your wedding was next weekend. Lies, all lies. You don't get confused about your daughter's wedding date. You don't accidentally go to the wrong event when it's written on a hand-delivered invitation that's been on your refrigerator for 2 months. I hung up and returned to my reception, where David was waiting with a concerned expression. Everything okay? They forgot, I whispered. They went to Sarah's engagement party instead. David's face went through about 5 different emotions before settling on barely contained fury. They what? It's fine, I said, even though it wasn't, even though I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. It's our day. Let's not let them ruin it. But they had ruined it. Or at least they'd left a stain on what should have been the most perfect day of my life. Every time someone asked where my family was, every time I saw other couples dancing with their parents, every time I thought about the empty chairs in the front row where they should have been sitting, it hurt all over again. For weeks after the wedding, I tried to convince myself that it really had been a mistake, that somehow, despite all evidence to the contrary, my family had genuinely gotten confused about the date. It was easier than accepting the alternative, that they had deliberately chosen my sister over me once again. But then I started asking questions, and the more I dug, the angrier I got. First, I asked my cousin Mark, who had been invited to both events. Wait, he said when I called him, weren't those on different days? I remember looking at both invitations and thinking it was weird that they were the same weekend, but different days. Different days. Sarah's engagement party had been on Saturday. My wedding was on Sunday. There was no confusion, no mix-up. They had simply decided that Sarah's last-minute celebration was more important than my carefully planned wedding. Then I started thinking about the invitations themselves. I had mailed them to my parents' house, where Sarah was temporarily staying after a breakup with her previous boyfriend. She had been living there for about 3 months, sleeping in her old room and saving money while she figured out her next steps. The invitations had been delivered. I had tracking confirmation from the postal service. Someone at that house had signed for them. Someone had received them and known exactly when my wedding was supposed to happen. That's when I decided to do some real investigating. I called the postal service and asked for detailed delivery information. The package had been delivered at 2:17 p.m. on March 15th, signed for by someone with the initial S, Sarah. Then I checked my email. I had sent follow-up emails to my parents' shared email account with all the wedding details, timeline, directions, hotel recommendations for out-of-town guests. The emails had been opened multiple times. Someone had been reading them. But here's where it gets really interesting. I had access to that email account because my parents, being somewhat technologically challenged, had asked me to help them set it up years earlier and had never changed the password. So I logged in. Every single email I had sent about the wedding had been deleted. Not just deleted, completely purged from the trash folder. Someone had gone through and systematically removed every trace of wedding-related communication. Someone had intercepted my invitations, deleted my emails, and then convinced my parents that my wedding was on a different date entirely. Someone had sabotaged my wedding deliberately, maliciously, with full knowledge of what they were doing. And that someone was my sister. The more I uncovered, the more elaborate Sarah's deception became. This wasn't a spontaneous act of jealousy or a moment of weakness. This was a calculated, deliberate campaign to isolate me from my family on the most important day of my life. She had intercepted the invitations when they arrived. She had accessed my parents' email and deleted every wedding-related message. She had then told them that I had changed the date, that the wedding was actually the following weekend, and that I was being dramatic about them confirming attendance. But the real masterstroke was the engagement party. See, Sarah had gotten engaged 3 weeks after my wedding invitations went out. 3 weeks. And instead of planning her celebration for any other weekend, she specifically chose the same day as my wedding. When I called Mark back and pressed him for more details, the truth came out. Sarah had told everyone that I had been informed about the engagement party and had decided to move my wedding to avoid conflicts. She had said that I was understanding about family coming first and that I supported her celebration taking priority since engagements were more rare and special than weddings. She had rewritten the entire narrative, making herself the victim and me, the understanding sister, who was fine with being overlooked once again. My parents, who had no reason to suspect their golden child of such elaborate manipulation, believed every word. They thought they were doing the right thing by supporting Sarah's engagement celebration. They thought I had willingly stepped aside, as I always had, to let my sister have her moment in the spotlight. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Not only had she stolen my wedding day from me, but she had made it look like it was my choice, like I was so pathetic, so desperate for family approval, that I would voluntarily give up my own wedding to make room for her engagement party. And the worst part? It almost worked. For months, I believed that maybe I had somehow miscommunicated the date. Maybe I had been unclear in my emails. Maybe I had created the confusion myself. That's what gaslighting does to you. It makes you question your own reality, your own memories, your own sanity. It makes you think that maybe you really are as unreliable and unimportant as everyone seems to believe you are. But I had the receipts. I had the tracking information, the email logs, the timestamps, the evidence, and I was going to use every single piece of it. By November, I had pieced together the entire conspiracy. I knew exactly what Sarah had done and how she had done it. I had screenshots, tracking numbers, email headers, and testimony from other family members who had been told different versions of the story. The question was what to do with this information. I could have confronted Sarah privately, but what would that accomplish? She would deny it, make excuses, probably turn it around on me somehow. She was a master manipulator who had been practicing her craft for 30+ years. A private conversation would just give her the opportunity to craft a new lie. I could have told my parents, but they had already proven that they would believe Sarah's version of events over mine. They would probably find a way to make her the victim in this scenario too, the way they always did. No, I needed something bigger, something public, something that would make it impossible for Sarah to lie her way out of or for my family to ignore. I needed the perfect moment to reveal the truth, and Thanksgiving dinner presented exactly that opportunity. I spent weeks preparing. I organized all my evidence into a clear chronological presentation. I practiced staying calm, keeping my voice steady, presenting facts rather than emotions. I knew that the moment I got hysterical or started crying, they would dismiss me as being dramatic or oversensitive, the way they always had. I also prepared myself emotionally for the aftermath. I knew that exposing Sarah's lies wouldn't magically fix our family or suddenly make my parents love me more. I knew it might actually make things worse, might cause even more damage to relationships that were already broken. But I was tired of protecting everyone else's feelings at the expense of my own. I was tired of being the family scapegoat, the one who absorbed all the dysfunction so everyone else could pretend we were normal. I was tired of letting Sarah's cruelty go unchallenged while she continued to be praised and celebrated. Most importantly, I was tired of carrying this weight alone. The truth deserved to see daylight, regardless of how uncomfortable it made everyone. So I showed up to Thanksgiving dinner, armed with evidence and a determination to finally stand up for myself. I brought homemade pies that no one acknowledged, smiled through conversations about Sarah's wonderful life, and waited for the perfect moment to drop my bomb. When Sarah made her comment about some women never maturing, never finding love, never being worth marrying, she handed me that moment on a silver platter. The silence that followed my revelation was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was the kind of silence that feels dense, heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Everyone at the table was frozen, forks halfway to mouths, wine glasses suspended in mid-sip. Sarah's face had gone completely white. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, part shock, part terror, part rage. For the first time in our lives, she had no comeback, no quick deflection, no way to turn this around on me. "What do you mean, married?" my father asked slowly, as if the words didn't make sense in that order. "I mean exactly what I said," I replied, reaching into my purse and pulling out my phone. "David and I got married on May 15th, 2023, 6 months ago, in a beautiful garden ceremony that you were all invited to attend." My mother was shaking her head. "No, honey, that's not. We would have been there if you'd gotten married. We would never miss your wedding." "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice getting stronger. "You would never miss my wedding. Which is why I need to show you exactly what happened to your invitations." I opened my phone and started presenting my evidence methodically, like a prosecutor making a case to a jury. First, the delivery confirmation. Wedding invitations were delivered to this house on March 15th at 2:17 p.m., signed for by someone with the initial S. I showed them the screen with the tracking information. Sarah started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." Second, the email trail. I sent detailed wedding information to Mom and Dad's email account. Timeline, directions, hotel information. The emails were opened multiple times, then completely deleted. I showed them the email logs, the read receipts, the empty trash folder. Third, the testimony from other family members who were told different versions of this story. I scrolled to screenshots of text conversations with my cousin, my aunt, my uncle. Mark was told the wedding was moved to avoid Sarah's engagement party. Aunt Linda was told I decided to elope instead. Uncle Jim was told the wedding was postponed indefinitely. My parents were looking back and forth between me and Sarah like they were watching a tennis match. The confusion on their faces was genuine. They really had no idea what had happened. "But here's the most damning piece of evidence," I continued, feeling a surge of righteous anger that gave me strength. Sarah's engagement party was planned for May 15th, the exact same day as my wedding, despite the fact that she got engaged 3 weeks after my invitations were mailed. What are the odds that she would randomly choose that specific date out of all the weekends in the year? Sarah finally found her voice. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice was shaking. "You're being paranoid. Invitations get lost in the mail all the time. Maybe we didn't get them. Maybe—" "Sarah," I interrupted, looking directly at her. "I have your signature from the delivery receipt. Would you like me to show everyone how it matches your signature on the Mother's Day card you signed 6 months earlier?" Her mouth fell open. She hadn't expected me to be this thorough, this prepared. She had gotten away with manipulating the family for so long that she'd become careless, confident that no one would ever challenge her version of events. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, she said, her voice rising, but this is insane. Why would I do something like that? Why would I want to ruin your wedding? That's a great question, I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. Why would someone intercept wedding invitations, delete emails, and plan a competing event for the exact same day? Why would someone go to such elaborate lengths to make sure their sister's family didn't show up to her wedding? The table was silent except for the sound of my aunt dropping her fork onto her plate. Maybe, I continued, because the idea of me being happy, being chosen, being celebrated for once in my life was so threatening that it had to be sabotaged. Maybe because the family dynamic only works when I'm the failure, the disappointment, the one everyone can feel superior to. Tears were streaming down my mother's face. Emma, sweetheart, if we had known, if we had gotten the invitations, you did know, I said gently. Sarah made sure you knew. She just made sure you knew a lie instead of the truth. What happened next was like watching someone's entire persona crumble in real time. Sarah tried every defense mechanism in her arsenal, but none of them worked. First, she tried denial. This is all circumstantial. You can't prove I did anything wrong. So I showed her signature comparisons side by side. Her handwriting on the delivery receipt was unmistakably identical to her handwriting on birthday cards, Christmas cards, and grocery lists I'd found around the house. Then she tried deflection. Even if I did sign for something, that doesn't mean I knew what it was. Maybe I was just accepting a package for Mom and Dad. So I pulled up the Postal Service description of the package. Wedding invitations, 4 pieces, signature required. The delivery person had specifically noted what was being delivered. Then she tried minimization. Okay, maybe I did receive them, but I probably just forgot to mention it. I was going through a lot with my breakup at the time. So I showed the timeline of the email deletions, systematic, methodical, spread out over weeks. This wasn't forgetting. This was planning. Finally, she tried victimization. Why are you attacking me like this? I'm your sister. Even if I made a mistake, why are you trying to destroy our relationship over it? That's when I lost my composure for the first time all evening. Destroy our relationship? I said, my voice rising. What relationship, Sarah? The one where you've spent 32 years making sure I know I don't matter? The one where every achievement of mine is diminished, every celebration is overshadowed, every moment of happiness is somehow turned into something about you? My parents were staring at both of us like they'd never seen us before. You sabotaged my wedding, I continued, the words pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. You made sure my own parents missed the most important day of my life so that you could have a party about getting engaged after 8 months of dating. You didn't just ruin one day, you ruined every day since then because I've been carrying this hurt and confusion and betrayal around for 6 months, wondering what I did wrong, wondering why my own family would abandon me like that. Sarah was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of a child having a tantrum because she'd been caught. It was my time, she shouted, all pretense of innocence finally gone. I was supposed to be getting married first. You were supposed to be the single one, the one who needed help finding someone. That was your role in this family. There it was, the truth, finally out in the open. I worked so hard to build my relationship with James, she continued, referring to her fiancé who was sitting next to her, looking absolutely horrified. I planned everything perfectly, and then suddenly you're getting married first. to some guy none of us even really know. And you expect everyone to just celebrate you like you're something special? My father found his voice for the first time all evening. Sarah Elizabeth, what are you saying? I'm saying she's not the special one, Sarah screamed. She's never been the special one. She's the backup child, the one who exists to make me look better by comparison. She doesn't get to suddenly become the bride, the center of attention, the one everyone celebrates. That's my job. The silence that followed was devastating, not just quiet, but the kind of silence that comes after something irreparable has been said, something that can never be taken back or explained away. James, Sarah's fiancé, slowly stood up from the table. I need some air, he said quietly, and walked out the back door. My mother was sobbing openly now. Sarah, how could you do that to your sister? Because she's not supposed to be better than me, Sarah shouted. She's not supposed to win. In that moment, watching my sister's complete psychological breakdown, I finally understood the dynamic that had governed our entire lives. This wasn't about sibling rivalry or competition. This was about identity. Sarah's entire sense of self was built on being better than me. She needed me to be the failure, the disappointment, the cautionary tale, because without that contrast, she wasn't special anymore. She was just ordinary. Every time I succeeded at something, it threatened the foundation of who she thought she was. Every achievement of mine was a crack in her carefully constructed superiority complex. My wedding wasn't just an event to her. It was an existential threat to the narrative that made her feel valuable. She had sabotaged my wedding not out of momentary jealousy, but out of desperate self-preservation. In her twisted world view, my happiness literally couldn't coexist with her identity. The cruelty wasn't incidental, it was essential. She needed me to suffer so she could continue to see herself as the blessed one, the chosen one, the daughter worthy of love and celebration. My parents were finally seeing what I had lived with my entire life. The golden child they had created wasn't just imperfect. She was cruel, manipulative, and willing to destroy her own sister's happiness to maintain her position in the family hierarchy. I think you should leave, my father said to Sarah, his voice quiet but firm. I think you should leave right now. Sarah looked around the table desperately, searching for an ally, someone who would defend her or minimize what she had done. She found none. Even her fiancé had stayed outside, probably rethinking everything he thought he knew about the woman he was planning to marry. This isn't fair, she said, her voice small and broken. I'm your daughter too. I matter too. Yes, you do matter, my mother said through her tears. But so does Emma. She's always mattered, and we failed her by not seeing that. We failed both of you. I watched Sarah gather her things, her face a mask of rage and humiliation. Part of me felt sorry for her, the part that remembered the sister who used to read me bedtime stories and teach me to braid friendship bracelets. But that sister had been gone for a long time, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of unthinkable cruelty. As she headed for the door, she turned back one last time. I hope you're happy, she spat. You got what you wanted. You destroyed our family. I stood up slowly, feeling 32 years of suppressed anger and pain crystallizing into perfect clarity. I didn't destroy this family, Sarah, I said, my voice steady and strong. I exposed the parts of it that were already broken. I revealed the cruelty that everyone kept pretending didn't exist. I stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. I looked around the table at my parents, my relatives, my sister's fiance, who had returned to collect her. For 32 years, I believed there was something wrong with me. I thought I wasn't good enough, smart enough, lovable enough to earn the same affection and respect that came so easily to Sarah. I spent my entire life trying to fix whatever was broken in me that made me unworthy of my family's love. My voice was getting stronger with each day. My parents were finally understanding. My sister was finally forgiving. Sarah finally stepped up to feel some reality. My parents began to believe that their favoritism was just part of the family, no difference between their daughters. I didn't know how to survive. I had a husband who loves me, who chose me, who sees my worth without needing anyone else to be diminished by comparison. I have friends who celebrate my successes without feeling threatened by them. I have a life that I built despite this family, not because of it. I headed for the door, then turned back one final time. Sarah, I hope someday you find a way to feel valuable without needing to make others feel worthless. And Mom, Dad, I hope you figure out how to love both your daughters without creating a competition between them. I walked out into the crisp November air, got into my car, and drove home to my husband who was waiting for me with hot chocolate and arms ready to hold me while I processed everything that had just happened. The weeks following that Thanksgiving were a whirlwind of phone calls, text messages, and family drama that felt both devastating and liberating. Sarah sent me a series of increasingly desperate messages. First, angry texts, calling me vindictive and cruel. Then, long emails trying to justify her actions, claiming she had been protecting the family from some unnamed drama I would have caused. Finally, tearful voicemails begging me to forgive her, saying she was sorry and didn't know why she had done what she did. I didn't respond to any of them. What could I say? Sorry doesn't undo 6 months of believing my family had abandoned me on my wedding day. Sorry doesn't erase 32 years of systematic emotional abuse disguised as sibling dynamics. My parents, to their credit, tried to make amends. They sent flowers, called repeatedly, even showed up at my house one evening with photo albums they had put together of my childhood, trying to prove they had always loved me. But here's the thing about childhood trauma. It's not erased by good intentions or retroactive attention. Those photos just reminded me of all the events they had minimized, all the achievements they had overlooked, all the moments they had chosen Sarah over me. We started family therapy, my parents and me, without Sarah. It was uncomfortable and painful and necessary. Slowly, very slowly, we began to unpack decades of dysfunctional patterns. My father admitted that he had always found Sarah easier to relate to because she reminded him of himself, outgoing, confident, socially adept. He said he never knew how to connect with me because I was more introspective, more sensitive, more like my mother. My mother admitted that she had always worried about me, that my independence and strength had sometimes been mistaken for not needing support or attention. She said she had assumed I was fine because I never complained, never demanded anything, never made a fuss about being overlooked. They were both devastated to learn how their favoritism had affected me, how it had shaped my entire sense of self-worth and belonging in the world. They genuinely hadn't realized the extent of the damage they had caused, but understanding the reasons behind their behavior didn't automatically heal the wounds it had created. Forgiveness, I learned, is a process, not a moment of decision. The most shocking development was what happened to Sarah in the aftermath of that Thanksgiving dinner. Her fiancé, James, broke up with her 2 weeks later. Apparently, watching her complete psychological breakdown and learning about her capacity for elaborate cruelty had made him rethink everything he thought he knew about her. She had to move back in with my parents, which created its own set of tensions. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the golden child. She was the daughter who had disappointed them, who had shattered their image of their family. Sarah didn't handle this role reversal well. She quit her job, stopped taking care of herself, and became increasingly bitter and isolated. She blamed me for destroying her life, but she also seemed genuinely confused by the consequences of her own actions. It was like watching someone whose entire identity had been built on quicksand finally sink when the foundation gave way. She had never developed a sense of self that wasn't dependent on being superior to me, and without that dynamic, she didn't know who she was. Part of me felt sorry for her, but mostly I felt relieved. For the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for managing her emotions or protecting her from consequences. I wasn't required to minimize my own pain to preserve her comfort. The most beautiful part of this whole experience was coming home to David every day and remembering what it felt like to be truly loved. He never said, "I told you so" about my family, never tried to make me choose between him and them. He just held space for my pain and my healing, the way a real partner should. Lucy, my stepdaughter, started calling me Mom Emma around Christmas time, not because anyone asked her to, but because she wanted to. She drew me pictures of our family, her, David, me, and our cat, and hung them on the refrigerator with pride. I realized that family isn't just the people you're born to, it's the people who choose you, who see your worth, who celebrate your happiness without feeling diminished by it. My friends from work threw me a belated wedding reception in January, complete with cake and dancing and speeches about how much they loved David and me together. It was everything my original reception should have been. Joyful, loving, focused on celebrating our love, rather than managing family dysfunction. David's family officially adopted me as their own. His mother, Marie, started sending me the same birthday and holiday cards she sent to her other daughters-in-law. His father, Tom, walked me down the aisle at my friend's wedding when she asked me to be her maid of honor. I learned what it felt like to be part of a family that functioned with love instead of competition, support instead of manipulation, genuine care instead of performative affection. This whole experience taught me things about myself and about relationships that I never could have learned any other way. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't cruel or vindictive. It's necessary. That protecting other people's feelings at the expense of your own truth isn't kindness. It's enabling dysfunction. I learned that some people are only capable of loving you in ways that serve them, and that accepting that kind of love is actually a form of self-harm. I learned that family systems can be incredibly resistant to change, and that sometimes the only way to break destructive patterns is to refuse to participate in them anymore. Most importantly, I learned that my worth was never dependent on my family's ability to see it. I had spent decades trying to earn love that should have been freely given, trying to prove value that should have been inherent, trying to fix relationships that were broken by design. The truth is, I had always been worthy of love, respect, and celebration. The problem was never with me. It was with a system that required someone to be diminished so someone else could feel elevated. It's been almost a year since that Thanksgiving dinner, and my life looks completely different now. David and I renewed our vows on our first anniversary with all the people who actually matter to us in attendance. It was small, intimate, and absolutely perfect. My parents came, and they cried happy tears this time. They walked me down the aisle together, and for the first time in my life, I felt like they truly saw me as their daughter, not just as Sarah's sister. Sarah wasn't there. She had sent a card with a generic message about wishing us well, But we both knew our relationship was over, not because I held on to anger, but because she had never taken real responsibility for what she had done. Her apologies were always qualified, always included justifications, always ended with expectations that I should move on and forgive her, because that's what family does. But I've learned that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I can forgive Sarah for being so damaged that she needed to damage me to feel whole. But that doesn't mean I have to expose myself to her toxicity again. My relationship with my parents is slowly healing. We're all in therapy, working on building new patterns, learning how to relate to each other without the dysfunction that defined our family for so long. It's hard work, and there are setbacks, but there's also genuine progress. Most importantly, I'm happy. Really, truly, deeply happy in a way I never was before. I wake up every morning grateful for my husband, my stepdaughter, my friends, my work, my life that I built despite everything. I used to think that being overlooked by my family meant I was forgettable. Now I know that being unseen by people who were determined not to see me says nothing about my visibility and everything about their blindness. If you're listening to this story and recognizing yourself in it, if you're the family scapegoat, the forgotten child, the one who's always accommodating everyone else's dysfunction, I want you to know something. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You are not required to minimize your pain to protect other people's comfort. You are not required to accept crumbs and call it love. You deserve to be seen, celebrated, chosen, and valued for who you really are. You deserve relationships that lift you up instead of requiring you to shrink. You deserve family, whether biological or chosen, that adds to your life instead of subtracting from it. And if the people who are supposed to love you can't or won't do that, it's not because you're unworthy of love. It's because they're incapable of giving it in the way you deserve to receive it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to earn what should be freely given and start building a life with people who already see your worth. Sometimes the truth doesn't break a family. It reveals the cracks that were always there, hiding underneath years of pretending and accommodating and accepting the unacceptable. And sometimes, the moment you stop protecting everyone else from the consequences of their choices is the moment you finally start protecting yourself. That Thanksgiving dinner didn't destroy my family. It freed me from the prison of their dysfunction and allowed me to build something better. A life based on truth instead of lies, on genuine love instead of conditional acceptance, on my actual worth instead of their inability to see it. I hope that if you need to have your own moment of truth, you find the courage to speak it. I hope you find your own David, your own chosen family, your own happily ever after that doesn't depend on the approval of people who were never capable of giving it freely. And I hope you remember that sometimes the best thing you can do for the people who hurt you is to stop enabling their behavior and force them to face the reality of what they've done. The truth might be painful, but it's also the only path to real healing. And you, whoever you are, wherever you are in your own family drama, deserve to heal. You deserve to be free. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be celebrated. And you deserve to stop settling for anything less. As I finish telling you this story, David is making dinner in our kitchen while Lucy does her homework at our dining room table. This is my family now, messy and imperfect, and real and full of genuine love. I still think about Sarah sometimes, and when I do, I feel sad for the sister she could have been if she hadn't been so consumed by the need to diminish me to elevate herself. I feel sad for the family we could have been if my parents had learned how to love us both without creating a competition between us. But mostly, I feel grateful. Grateful for the truth, even though it was painful. Grateful for the courage to speak it, even though it changed everything. Grateful for the family I found after I stopped trying so hard to fix the one I was born into. That Thanksgiving dinner was the end of one story and the beginning of another. The end of accepting less than I deserved, and the beginning of building a life worthy of who I really am. And honestly, I wouldn't change a single moment of it, because sometimes the most beautiful thing that can happen to you is discovering that you're stronger than you ever imagined, braver than you ever knew, and worthy of so much more love than you were taught to expect. Sometimes the truth really does set you free, even when, especially when, it hurts like hell to speak it.